Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all again to our 2024 DC Intern Summit. My name is Yael Shavelson, and I'm proud and incredibly grateful to be interning at the Luce Center this summer. Our first speaker today is Paula Scanlan, a prominent defender of women's single-sex spaces and advocate for free speech. The former NCAA swimmer and current spokeswoman for the Independent Women's Forum made waves when she spoke out about having to compete with trans-identifying swimmer Lia Thomas and being forced to share a bathroom with him. Paula's story hits home for me because, as a freshman, I was forced to share a bathroom with a transgender woman as well. Neither my university nor the biological man I often showered next to seemed to care that this was an all-female dorm. In fact, the only all-female dorm on campus. Scanlan spoke out against the destruction of women's spaces on Matt Walsh's incendiary documentary, What is a Woman? Since then, she has testified before Congress on her experience sharing a locker room with Thomas, and has talked at campuses across the country about the necessity of standing up for what is moral and true. Please join me in a round of applause for Paula Scanlan.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this morning. I know there's a lot of other political things happening, particularly last night. So I definitely was watching that, and that was very interesting, to say the least. I will not divulge in commentary on that at the moment, but just had to address it. But yes, I appreciate all of you guys so much. But more than anything, I appreciate being in a room of women, but not just in a room of women, a room of real women, and a room of women that I know support me and respect me, because nowadays that's actually not so common. So that I just truly want to say this means the world. I love Clare Boothe Luce. The last time I spoke, I found out she's actually from Connecticut originally. And as someone from Connecticut myself, it's not common that we see conservative women up there. So that also is just really great to have that experience, to see all of that. But that being said, I'm just going to share briefly. I know many of you are probably familiar, but I'm going to share my experience of what happened to me while I was in college and just how that shaped my perspective on how to stand up for myself, my perspective on how to be a strong woman and do womanly things, but also stand up for the truth, because in this world, a lot of people are afraid to speak even common basic truths, a truth that's so simple as the difference between male and female. So I started swimming at age 8 competitively, and very quickly I realized it was something I really loved and I wanted to do it in college. And I continued to work hard through my career. Like all college athletes, I dedicated many hours to swimming, and eventually I was able to get accepted to the University of Pennsylvania, which was a dream come true until it quickly became a nightmare, which we'll obviously get into. And so in this experience, I joined my team. Everything is normal my freshman year, but things started to go south my sophomore year, which at the time is the fall of 2019. The fall of 2019, our coach says, we have a mandatory team meeting right before practice, and I remember this very vividly. It was a Friday afternoon. And our coach is standing there with a member of the men's team. His name was Lia Thomas. And he looks at Will and says, Will, this is your meeting. Before he even began to speak, I said, why does a member of the men's team need to run a women's team meeting? And he simply looked at all of us and said, I am transgender, and I will be transitioning to your team next season. Please refer to me with she, her pronouns. Keep in mind at this time, the name Lia had not been announced yet, so we were expected to call a member of the men's team who was changing in the men's locker room, competing on the men's team, also going by the name William. We were expected to refer to him with she, her pronouns. And if anyone ever slipped up, we were told that we were hateful, we were bigoted, and we were non-inclusive. Imagine how confusing that is. It's the interesting thing about this whole pronoun issue is my family's from Taiwan originally, my mom's side of the family. In Chinese, he and she is the same word. So my grandmother oftentimes calls me he, and you don't see me calling it a hate crime for my 87-year-old grandmother. But yet we're in a day and age now where if you accidentally mess up calling a male William by she, her, we're told that we're the problem and we're hateful. So that was incredibly difficult, but the worst is that they continued to train us on it. We'd have classes talking about the usage of these pronouns and all of this stuff. And it was mind-boggling because that's something I had never expected I would need to be learning in college as an 18 to 22-year-old. But again, this is where we are today in this country. And as time went on, eventually there was a gap year because of COVID and all of that. I'm sure if any of you guys were in high school or college at the time, you know how crazy that was. And eventually, 2 years later now, it's the fall of 2021, I'm now a senior. Thomas joins our team. And in this experience, we were originally told that he would not be undressing in the locker room with us. We show up for the first day of practice in September, and he has a locker next to everyone else's, and we're expected to undress with him in this locker room. One of my friends had the locker next to him, and she went to our coach and said, "This is a joke, right?" She said, "There is no way you expect me to undress every single week this entire season next to a 6'4" tall man." And our coach looked her dead in the eyes and said, "I'm sorry, but if you want to be on this team, that's what you have to do." And she accepted it like I did, like all of my other teammates, because we felt privileged to be able to compete in college. I had worked so hard my entire life to be accepted to such a good school, to be able to swim D1. I wasn't ready to give that up, even if it meant subjecting myself to undressing next to a man. I wasn't ready to give up everything I had worked for my entire life because I simply wanted to stand up for the truth. I know now that, of course, I should have, but that's the situation they put us in, and they know us as women, we're never going to do that. No woman wants to give up everything that she's ever worked for to just stand up for something. It's so hard, especially being the lone person that does that, because you want everyone else in the room to agree with you, and you're afraid to say that because you don't know what the people next to you are thinking. And that is really explanatory of the entire situation, the entire season that we're in. It was so many different people had this opinion of whether it was the locker room or whether it was the competition. They knew it was unfair, but they were so afraid to say what they thought in their mind out loud because they were worried about the validation and acceptance of everyone around them. And again, this is something us as women struggle with more than the men. And it's not a negative thing necessarily. It's just the reality of us being compassionate, of our nature to be mothers, our nature to be loving. And so as the season went on, I continued to observe this. And at the beginning, it was unclear whether Thomas was how fast he was going to swim. And of course, as soon as he got in the pool, he broke every team record in every single event that he swam. He boosted our team scores in every meet he competed in. And it was as bad as you could probably imagine a 6'4" tall man competing on a women's swim team. Eventually, Thomas went on and won an NCAA championship in the 500-yard freestyle. By the way, the University of Pennsylvania has never had a female NCAA champion. So it really boosted our team from having never scored points at that meet to placing top 20 in the country. And by the way, the girls he beat in that race were all Olympic medalists. They weren't just Olympians. They have medals from the Olympics, and they placed after him in that event. If that shows anyone anything, you don't have to know anything about swimming or sports for that matter to know that is completely ridiculous and insane. But what's worse about the situation is not that outcome, because of course everybody saw that. The entire world saw that happen, and there were protesters at that meet. The entire world was outraged by the situation. What the worst was is the way that they treated anyone who objected. So as the season went on, the beginning, the university and the athletic department tried to ignore the problem, because that is always what seems to happen in these situations. It's not a real issue if we ignore it. But before they could get a hold of us, the media started to figure out what was going on, because it's not hard to figure out that a senior who's never competed before If you look at his history, you find out he was on the men's team. So eventually some reporters figure this out, and it becomes a media story, because it should be. And it actually, for me, it was painful how long it took for somebody to realize and put two and two together. So the media begins picking up, and the university realizes at this point they need to do damage control. So they send in administrators to us. They say, mandatory team meeting for the women. You must be here at this time. We don't care if you have class. We don't care what your other commitments are. You will be at this meeting. Notably, they told Lia to not come to the meeting. So it was just the real women on the team, and Lia was told to stay home. We show up to the pool deck, and there is no fewer than 12 administrators standing there. And they look at us and they say, Lia being on this team is a non-negotiable. Whether you like it or not, Lia will be competing, so you might as well get on board. And they said, and if you need any other indications that this is going to happen, they say, you will never be able to find a job if you object to this publicly. They told us that it was hateful and discriminatory if we ever spoke against it. They told us that we would be tainted by it for the rest of our lives, and anyone you would ever meet would look you up online and see that you were a hateful, transphobic bigot. And the scariest thing about that is telling 18 and 22-year-old girls that they'll never be able to find a job. I mean, the entire purpose of going to college is to eventually find employment. Of course, you're going to have a hard time accepting that. And they continue to just push this messaging to us. They continue to say, you're hateful, you will never be able to find a job, your life will be over, everything you've worked for will be ruined. And they said, if everything we've just said is not enough for you, if everything we've just threatened you with is not enough, please seek psychological services. And they had a representative from psychological services stand up and say, I'm here, please take my number. And it was at this point I realized this was not just about controlling the narrative, this was about re-education. They wanted us to think a certain way. Because you don't go to therapy for being uncomfortable and dressing with a man. You go to therapy and they tell you that you're hateful. They tell you that you're wrong. They tell you that you need to accept this. And that is the messaging that they push to us continually. And also at this meeting, they had a representative from the LGBT Center who told us that inclusion of trans individuals is so important in society. They also told us that if we don't include trans-identified individuals in society, that they will commit suicide and it will be our fault. And that is incredibly scary to tell young girls that they're contributing to someone's suicide if you simply object to competing and undressing alongside a male. And by the way, it was not just my university that did this. The girls at Harvard swimmers, they were also emailed in writing saying the same exact thing. And it was clear to me that the messaging on this issue was identical at all the schools. I saw the exact language that the Harvard girls were sent, and it was the same thing I was told. And even other universities that even weren't in the Ivy League that were forced to compete against Thomas, when I talked to those other athletes and shared their experiences, they said their universities had similar responses to the situation. And it showed me how overreaching this push for wanting women to accept men into their spaces, into their sports. And the worst part about all of it is the lack of ability to talk about it. And by the way, we were undressing with Thomas at this point 18 times every single week in that locker room. This was not something we were just doing once or twice. We were expected to fully undress next to a man 18 times every single week. I don't know what parent would want their daughter doing that, and I certainly would never wish anyone would do that. I heard my introduction today saying that she was forced to do that at her school. This is happening across the country. This is not just about sports. You don't have to be an athlete to be hurt by this issue. This is happening in bathrooms, locker rooms, even women's prisons. We've been hearing stories of female prisoners that are being forced to share prison cells with males, many of which have predatory crimes that brought them there. This issue is really an attack on women, and it is getting so far because they know us women are accommodating. They know us women want to be loving and caring, and they are exploiting that. And that is what's so hard about this, but also what gives me hope, because I'm looking at a room full of you guys that I know wouldn't stand up for this. And that is really why it's important for us to stand strong on this and support each other and support speaking out and support speaking the truth, because everyone knows deep down males and females are different. And we've come to a point where we just can't even admit basic truths out loud. And in my experience at the university, I continued to try to talk about this, and I was constantly met with teammates and coaches and professors saying that my messaging was hateful. I even had professors in other courses trying to force us to be trans inclusive, whatever that means, saying that if you object to anyone who identifies as a woman, that you are somehow against women. I've been called the word misogynist so many times. What I don't understand is, how is it not misogynistic to force women to give up their scholarships, their roster spots, their opportunities? Why are we convincing women that it's important to undress in locker rooms with men? I don't know why that's not considered misogyny, but for some reason, if I don't accept a male being a woman, I'm the problem. And it's truly, it's just, I don't even know how we got here. I really, truly am just, it's just shocking to even have to say this, I never thought when I was growing up, when I took biology freshman year of high school, that I would ever have to defend and justify the differences between male and female. But here we are. And I think what this taught me is this is so much deeper than just that, because we are at a point where you're not allowed to speak your mind on anything. I know of people who have been failed in courses because they are saying there's differences between men and women. People are getting cited by their universities for objecting to undressing with men in locker rooms and bathrooms. And this is just the start. People think this is really bad so far. It is. But we are reaching this point in this country where if you can't talk about these issues, where are we? And I saw this further when I actually tried to write an op-ed for the school newspaper. So as the season goes on, I noticed there was a lot of pro-Lia content coming out, which shocked me, because polling actually shows that at least 85% of people in this world agree that men should not compete on women's sports teams. But again, they still highlight the people who are on the other side of this, which is fair. That's their right to. I appreciate trying to read the other side on this issue. While I don't agree with them, I do appreciate their right to be able to do that. And they were pushing all these articles out, and eventually I said, okay, let's write something on the opposing side. And I said, I just want to analyze the NCAA policy that allowed this, which, by the way, the NCAA policy, which is still in place today, says 1 year of testosterone suppressant is enough to make a man fair to compete on a women's swim team, or any women's sports team, sorry, for that matter. And obviously, testosterone suppressant for 1 year does not take away the differences between men and women, because men on average are taller, have larger lungs, have higher bone density. Even males' hips are narrower than women. So in a sport like swimming, when you push off the wall, males' bodies are actually more hydrodynamic and they would push off further. There's just so many differences that are not accounted for by just one hormone in the human body. And I analyzed all of that. I said exactly that men and women are different. I analyzed the differences between times in many sports. And I didn't say anything really about Thomas as an individual, because that was not the goal, because actually Thomas was following the rules. It was the rules that were the problem. And we write this article, and they edit it, and they take out lines and lines, and they told me I was hateful for putting the sentence in there saying if we continue to allow this to happen, women will be discouraged from competing in sports. And they said, that line is offensive and rude. How is it offensive and rude? It's true. If we allow men to take our spots, women will be discouraged. I didn't realize that was controversial, but I conceded, and I said, okay, you can take it out as long as we can get it published. Eventually, after many lines of retracting and edits and censorship, eventually they do publish this article. But within a couple of hours, it's quickly retracted, with no notice to myself and no notice to any of the readers. Just silence. They wanted to pretend like it didn't happen. And I tried to find out what happened with it and why it was retracted so quickly. And eventually, after weeks of hounding this editor I was working with, he told me that the entire staff was threatening to quit over the article being published because they said they couldn't stand by student-led transphobia. Because apparently analyzing the differences between Olympic times between men and women and talking about science and hormone levels and bone density is somehow transphobia, whatever that word means, because I'm frequently called that, and I don't even know what it means anymore, to be entirely honest, because it is used so often and in every single context that you could imagine if you say anything about this issue. But it was truly at this point, again, I realized this is so much bigger than men competing on women's swim teams. This is so much bigger than not wanting to undress in a locker room 18 times with a man. We have reached the point where we are afraid to say the truth. We are afraid to use our voices, and we are afraid to listen to people with opposing viewpoints. And that is what really broke my heart in this situation, because this country was built on people disagreeing with each other. It's actually important that you disagree with other people. I certainly hope every single one of you in this room do not have all the same exact viewpoints on everything, because if not, I would be leading a cult meeting if every single one of you believes the same thing. It is true, and that's what's so interesting is us on the more conservative side, we do disagree with each other. I spend all my time hanging out with different conservatives, and we get into arguments about various different things. Every single issue, and I don't even need to get into any of them. You can imagine there's nuances to every single viewpoint, and you have your own life experiences to shape the way that you think and shape why you believe something. And sometimes those viewpoints adapt. Sometimes you experience something and it changes your view on it. Or sometimes you get into a debate with somebody and they're able to change your viewpoint, which is incredibly powerful. Or you debate somebody and your own viewpoint becomes stronger. It's in those debates that we figure out the solutions to these issues and we figure out where you stand better. You've either become stronger in your own viewpoint or your mind has changed, and both of those things are equally powerful. And especially as women, we're told to not debate that way. But no, I encourage all of you to get into that. Even in the breaks, talk about some of these issues and don't be afraid to have the person next to you disagree. And so after I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania, I did a lot of anonymous things. I was anonymously in the What is a Woman documentary, but I wasn't ready to risk everything. I wasn't ready to risk that job they told me I was never going to have if I spoke out. And it was interesting because I went onto this corporate workplace and I started talking to my coworkers about normal things, and eventually people figured out I was a swimmer at the University of Pennsylvania. And of course, my situation came up because everyone in the world knew how completely insane it was. And I remember this one time I was having a conversation with a coworker, and he very subtly said, "Oh, what are your thoughts about the situation?" without disclosing his own opinion on the matter. And I said, "Absolutely, it was completely ridiculous and insane." And he says, "Oh, I'm so glad that you think that." And I said to him, "Okay, so you agree with me, but you were not willing to disclose what you thought about it until I gave you an answer. Why?" And he says, "I didn't want to hurt your feelings. I didn't want to argue. I didn't want to be upset." And I looked at him and I said, "No matter what I believed on it, you should have led with what you thought." Because it's those types of people, and again, no shade to this coworker at all, great person, but it's because of that behavior we've gotten to where we are, because we're in situations where everybody in the room agrees, but nobody's willing to be the first person to do it. And that is, again, where really hard and dangerous things come. And so obviously many of you guys, if you're familiar with who I am, you definitely know who Riley Gaines is. And so she was able to be that first person in the room. And why I bring this up is it was actually in my friendship with Riley Gaines that I'm here before all of you today. Because I saw that she could do it. And I said, okay, if she can do it, so can I. And why I share this with you is because you need to be that first person, because you need to empower other people. And that's why it is so important to speak the truth and to do that, but also not to be afraid to be a woman that does that. because we look at men a lot of the times, and men are more oftentimes leaders. And this is, again, not to be discriminatory to women. We are all amazing. I know every single one of you in this room is amazing. But oftentimes women are afraid to take that step and to step out away from the group. And I was certainly afraid of that. And in my team, none of my teammates have publicly spoken out at all about this. And it was really scary to be the sole person in the collective group that I was to have the opinion. But what I learned in it is how much more important it was to be that person, because I've made so many more friends. I've been able to be so much more confident. I've just been better off in my entire life, because living in a lie is so hard. It was so challenging to sit back and watch this continue to happen. A story I like to share a lot is there's this high school athlete, Peyton McNabb. She's a high school volleyball player. You're familiar with the video, but she was knocked unconscious in a high school volleyball game. And I watched that happen, and it was heartbreaking. And I realized that if I didn't speak out, I was part of the problem of allowing things like that to happen. And that's really when I started to realize, I don't care what friends I lose. I don't care what job I lose. I am part of the problem if I don't speak out to this. And so the reason I share this is you don't want to get to that point. You want to be, as soon as you see something, you say something. And so with that, I mean, obviously, I don't hope any of you ever experiencing something as crazy as having a 6'4" tall man try to join your women's swim team, because it was certainly an unprecedented event, which is still happening across the country at various different levels and capacities. But it doesn't need to take something as crazy as that. It's just simple things that you see. When you see something wrong, when you see something that isn't truthful, it's so important to say something about it. And to not be afraid to be the lone person in the room that's doing it, and to not be afraid to be a woman that's saying those things. I know as a woman, it's so hard, because you want to be loving, you want to be caring, and you are all of those things. But what I really struggled with, and this is what I will leave you guys with, is to tell the truth is to be loving and caring. And I have struggled with that a lot, because as a Christian, I want to love, but I also need to balance truth. And in anyone in this situation, the loving thing is to tell the truth. And so when you struggle with that, just remember that you are doing this from a place of love. And this is not against any of these men who think that they're women or want to invade our spaces. We should love them. And the loving thing to do is to tell them no and tell them the truth, and to also stand up for ourselves. And so with that, I thank all of you guys for being here. I really hope that you can continue on in your journey of whatever it is you choose to do as a career, or going back to college, or taking this to your university. It is so, so, so important to stand by that, to be strong, to be willing, to be brave. And I'm just honestly so encouraged by just having you guys even be here today, because a couple of years ago, this would not be something people would want to listen to, because they would say, this is too controversial. I'm not going to attend. So even just being here is the start. And I know everyone will continue to empower more people. It's so important you continue to bring these messages to other people in your community, and just be bold and brave and be truthful. And you will be so successful when you do all of that. So thank you guys so much.
We will take questions now.
Hello. Thank you so much for sharing your story. My name is Catherine Musgrove, and I graduated from Liberty University, and now I'm interning with Family Research Council. And I just was curious how the parents took that information when it first started coming out, and if they did anything for that.
Yes. A lot of parents did try to write letters to the NCAA, obviously fell on deaf ears. The NCAA still not changed their policy. I think if seeing a fully grown man win an NCAA championship is not enough for them. I don't know what more evidence they need. But many of the parents did try to write letters to the NCAA. Again, no response. For my parents personally, because this is the only thing I can really personally speak to, I think my parents were having such a hard time processing that this was even real. I would come home from on breaks and I would say, you know, Mom, Dad, there's a man changing in the locker room with me, and my dad would laugh. My mom would laugh. They thought it was funny. And I think that's sort of where that shows how insane this issue really is, right? It's something that's just so crazy that no one can process it. And that's really why it's so important we talk about it, because we have to share these stories, like my own, like many of the other women I know. We have to share these stories so people think it's real, right? That's why having a face to it is so important. That's why the girl gave me the introduction. Please continue to share your story about what you went through at your university, because they need to hear those personal stories in order to be moved by this. And again, the parents tried. It's just, for them, this is just something they never thought could be real. And again, I think my parents didn't even fully process the entire situation until after I had graduated. I was long gone by the time they realized, wait a minute, you were undressing in a locker room with a man 18 times every single week. My dad was like, I would have ran down there and yanked you out of there if I had fully processed that. So again, that's why the personal stories being shared is how we fix that, is how we be successful on that. And that's why, again, no matter how small it is, or if it just happened one time, it's so important that you add the personal aspect to it and you share it to as many people that are willing to listen.
Hi, my name is Sydney Fraser. I'm a student athlete as well at the University of Michigan, and I'm interning in Senator Cruz's office. Something that you said that really stood out to me was that we can think about, Thomas and kind of criticize them as much as we want, but at the end of the day, they were just following the rules. So how, in your opinion, do we get to the root of the problem and change the rules on a broader scale than just criticizing individual people?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I start to do full time now, actually. So I have written, I don't even know how many letters to various individuals of the NCAA. But something I work on in my day-to-day role is legislation. Right now, state level is what we're working with, because the federal current administration is not going to pass something that is favorable to our cause, to say the very least. But something I've been working on is going to these states and testifying on bills that either protect women's sports or go further and include spaces like bathrooms, locker rooms, prisons, you name it. And so that is something that obviously takes a lot of time, a lot of work, takes connections in states, but that is really how this is done. I mean, I know there's a lot of activists in the conservative space that just, go on Fox News and they talk and they get a lot of clicks and they get a lot of likes. But unfortunately, the wins are done through legislation and also through lawsuits, which is a crazy thing. There's an NCAA lawsuit going on right now, which is going to be a big changer. I'm not a part of it. The parameters for it was about the NCAA championship in particular. So Riley Gaines is the lead name on there. And that is something this is going to help. So passing legislation and lawsuits, but for everyday people, legislation is pushed by grassroots efforts. So if send letters to your congressman, send letters to your local government. Every single state we've passed legislation in, we have grassroots connections that were able to push it over the finish line. And I truly mean this. I stand by this. I don't think there's a single thing in this country that's been done successfully that wasn't helped by grassroots efforts. So again, be as vocal as you can, share with the community. I don't know, get your mom to post about it on Facebook. I'm actually being serious. I have seen Facebook mom groups push legislation. There's a group if any of you are from Colorado, there's a ballot initiative going on in Colorado. And it's literally moms on Facebook posting about it. And they've gotten thousands of signatures that way. So, and again, that is how change is made. So it's so important you get involved at that capacity. And again, it does not involve being on the news. It does not involve going and testifying personally. It's really those small efforts that you make. And that is how we win on this issue.
This will be our last question.
Hi, my name is Amelia. I'm interning for Kevin Kiley's office on the House of Representatives side. As an athlete, I just wanted to ask how you kept going your senior year. as an athlete, you spent your entire life working towards getting to college, and you know it's your last year. So in the pool, when you're working every single day, every single competition, how are you moving forward with this adversity you're facing in the locker room?
I've actually never been asked that at a speech, so I really appreciate that question. It was really challenging, to say the least. But my biggest takeaway from it was every single season in every sport, there's always adversity that you face. When I was in high school, I injured my shoulder pretty badly. Shoulder injuries are very, very common, and that was something I had to work through. And so my way was just saying, okay, this is just another piece of adversity. Well, it was one I never expected to happen, right? I maybe when I was younger knew I could possibly get injured because that's pretty common. It was just another thing you have to deal with. I know that just things are thrown at you that you don't necessarily know that you're able to get through, but you always do. And I think that it's just keeping strong, keeping your faith, and just continuing on everything is just how you get through any situation. And it was not easy. I will not lying to you. I had a lot of nights where I was saying, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be on this team. I don't want to deal with this. But I knew that it was my last year. I knew it was so much I had worked for. I knew that I wanted to be able to finish college and finish a full season my senior year. And it was just really just trying my best to work past it. And again, that's how you succeed in anything, is just continuing to work hard and continuing to just focus on yourself. And I know that's like kind of not the best answer, but I mean, it's how you deal with anything, because there's, again, whether it was going to be this, there was probably going to be something else I would have faced that year. And so just knowing that in my heart, it just helped me. Yeah.
All right.
Thank
Thank you, Paula, so much. We appreciate your sharing and everything that you do.